Welcome back to another episode of Flawless Playing Garage, where today we're going to rebuild the differential in my 1966 Chevrolet Corvair. And we're going to upgrade it so it can handle a little more power and torque, even though we'd be lucky if this thing even made 3 digits of either one of those. But mostly what we're going to do is wonder, why do I even own a lift? I'm going to spend all my time crawling around on the floor in the garage. Stay tuned. Yeah, so as you might have seen in my last video celebrating the 2021 Corvair Track Classic, I had to retire a bit earlier than I would have otherwise liked because the differential was making very bad noises. A lot of howling from the back end. Started out just under, really heavy load, and then was basically anytime the car was moving under its own power. And the side bearings in the diff were going out. But I decided this was also a good opportunity to do an upgrade. So we're going to tear it all apart. We're actually going to tear apart several parts differentials as well to get some extra gears that hopefully we can use in the process. And we're going to put it all back together, and almost certainly I'm going to get some of it wrong and probably make a big mess. But let's get started. Oh, and we might have a little help along the way too. Yeah, stick around. Now, just like in those old Haynes manuals, step 1, disconnect negative battery cable. Step 2, remove drivetrain. And then step 3 is to take the transaxle off the engine. Now, we'll cover the actual drivetrain removal in a different video, but it's not really too tough. And once it's out, the transaxle slides off pretty easily. Now, I do find this much easier to do just to drop the entire drivetrain rather than trying to pull the engine separately or the trans out separately, but your mileage may vary. Either way, once it's out, we're going to take the transmission off and then focus here on starting to tear down the differential itself. With these side gears, or whatever you want to call these retaining bits, tool would be kind of nice to have. And again, 25 years ago or so, I made one of these very poorly, and it worked, and I can't find it. So I made one again, also poorly, just to make sure that I'm being consistent. Nothing special, just a piece of plate steel, actually from leftovers from the Roadmaster chassis. So that's genuine American B-body steel there. And just, badly and ugly hand cut and then weld a nut in the middle. But should do the trick. Makes installing, removing, and adjusting quite a bit easier. So inside the Corvair differential, we have 2 spider gears stock, as they're referred to. And obviously, all of the power through the driveline ends up, at some point, going through the spider gears. And so, one of the upgrades that has been done in the aftermarket to strengthen the differential is to add another pair of spider gears. So you get 4. So it'll be 2 here and 2 here. Now, as you saw as I was tearing these down, to remove this, you've got to drive out the roll pin, slide the, whatever this carrier pin is, out, and then you've got the spider gears out. So obviously there's some custom machining work to set this whole thing up to have 4 gears. Now, may not surprise you to learn that, you can't just buy Corvair differential spider gears from GM. So, the gentleman that is doing this build for me suggested, he said, send as many as you can because frequently they don't end up passing the Magnaflux test and inspection. So that's why I have torn down 3 additional differentials and pulled the spider gears out of them. As far as I know, spider gears are the same for all the different years of the Corvair diffs, although I definitely have quite a amalgamation of different years that I've torn down here, both early model and late model. But in the end, I've got 2, 4, 6, 8 gears to send along, and hopefully out of those 8 we'll have 4 good ones. So as I continue to try to undo my mishmash of parts that were in this differential, I now have a used 6-bolt. It's got a 6-bolt flange with a transmission bolt. So this would be a 66 to 69 manual transmission differential case. I bought just a used empty case and a couple of yokes, because the yokes I had before, you can see how the bolt holes are different size. These are the late, I think 66, 69. This would be, I think, a 65 part with these small bolts. Just wanted to kind of get everything actually to be correct and, you know, the right size, the size that it's supposed to be for the 66 that my car is. So I've got the case, got a new used pair of yokes. I've got, so we've got here our 2 spider original carrier. And this is the stuff that I am sending off for the 4 spider conversion. So the yokes, the actual carrier itself, 6 extra spider gears, the side adjusters here, and the bolts. So Regan, when he rebuilds it and does the conversion to the 4 spider, he will also set it up so that, like, the bearings, he'll replace with new bearings here on the outer part of the carrier, and kind of get it all set up properly. The races in here on these pieces too. So he'll replace the bearings and races, and then just kind of get it set up. So I don't have to send the case. I'll do all the reassembly when that comes back. But this stuff is going to get boxed up and sent for the 4 spider upgrade. Cleaning up the case for the differential, and found something that shouldn't be a huge surprise, but a broken off bolt here in one of the attachment points for the bracket that holds the lower control arms. The slightly annoying part is that the bolt is below being flush with the surface here, so very difficult to get a nut on there and weld it. Also, someone has already drilled a hole in the bolt, so, and they've drilled it significantly off center. So the method of being able to just drill larger and larger holes in the bolt until you can kill it, either get it out or then just keep drilling bigger holes in the helicoil. Not a preferred method here, because the new hole, there's no way I'm going to get the new hole in the right spot with it being so far off center in the existing bolt. So I'm trying the extractor method, which, for the record, I'm pretty sure in 25 years of messing around with things has never once actually worked. I pretty much always break the extractors. But in this case, what I've been doing is heating the entire case by setting it on the wood stove and using MAP gas and penetrating oil, trying to really, really cook that joint, get whatever rust I can out of it. Then smacking it pretty good with a cold chisel, trying to get a little even rotation with a really small cold chisel on the bolt. I don't think I've gotten any rotation yet, but at least trying to shock it pretty good. And then very, very gently with the extractor trying to get it out. And I managed to get it to snap. When I say snap, I mean snapping the handle I was using on the extractor. Yeah. So this is going exactly as you would normally expect. Okay, we need a flawless plan of some kind to get this out. As I've said, the surface is down, the surface of the bolt is lower than the surface here, so getting something to weld into that is going to be pretty difficult. I have tried with a tiny cold chisel to get it to spin or move at all. Not having any luck there. I am chewing up the bolt some, as you can see. Somebody previously tried cutting across it already. And then, of course, we've got the very off-center hole that's been drilled. I do have a new idea for this. Let's see if it works. And here's that flawless plan. Strap the unit down to the drill press, get everything kind of roughly leveled out and supported. And then the piece de resistance, a piece of scrap metal that I drilled the appropriate size hole in and tack welded onto the differential case as a guide for the drill bit. My theory being that this way it'll keep the drill bit from moving around. Hopefully if I go slow enough, it won't be too distracted by that off-center hole. And I can drill this enough to be able to use a helicoil insert. Yeah, I know. We'll see. Another thing that's handy to have and a good idea while you're this deep is to add a drain plug. So we've actually got a boss in the 66 to 69 transaxle, at least, or the differential, at least in this case. So I'm going to drill this boss and then tap it for a half NPT plug, and you have a drain that way. You've got a fill plug here, but always nice to make life easier when you can. There we go. I think this will do nicely for a drain. Now it's time to finish cleaning this thing up and get some paint on it. Now, truly one of the most indispensable tools in your toolbox should be a legit shop manual. They're not that difficult to get and not terribly expensive, and man, the level of detail that they give you is just really tremendous and really helpful. There's a reason that, you know, the grumpy old geezers on the forums and on the Facebook groups, the first thing they tell you when you ask a question is look it up in the shop manual. You know, it really is an invaluable resource for these cars. My little top tip is to copy the pages that are relevant for the project, and then that way I can take the copied sheets out to the garage so it doesn't matter when I get them all greasy and fingerprinted while I'm working, and it keeps the rest of the book in, you know, slightly better condition. This is a pretty common failure point for Corvair differentials. This is the nose, I like to call it. I can't remember the official name, but it goes in here and the throwout bearing rides on this surface, and then the input shaft goes through it, and so you've got a seal in there for the input shaft. Now, what tends to happen is these will crack. The factory piece is not very thick metal, and you get cracks and actually chunks will break off pretty commonly from this nose, which will then obviously cause issues with the throwout bearing riding back and forth on it. And also, if there's any tiny little out of roundness on the input shaft or any damage or anything, you'll get leaks that are really hard to fix from the input shaft seal. So this is a piece that I got 20 some years ago to fix that problem. I got this from Clark's, great vendor. You can see they're supplying the other bits that I'm using for this rebuild too. And as you can see, like 20 years later, there's a little bit of kind of visual wear on it, but really no meaningful wear. It's still in great shape. It's reinforced, it's thicker, stronger than the original piece, and it's got the ridge inside where it receives the seal is deeper, so you can stack two seals, so you get a better chance of getting a good sealing surface. So I've just knocked these out, but basically I'm going to put new seals in, so there's two seals that go in here, and this little retaining collar will slide in there and just basically holds it with friction. Then the bearing surface goes on the back of that. All of that has to be pushed through from the inside. So that's the really annoying part about this particular type of failure on a Corvair diff, is that this is the first piece that goes in when you're assembling it. So if it cracks, if you have one that's cracked, you've got to take the entire differential apart so that you can pop this out and replace it. But this upgrade piece, still in good shape. It's going to go into this new case and go on the assembly. Okay, so I sent this to Regan Metcalf in Oregon. A recommendation from Greg King. Wow. Nicer than what I sent him for sure. Must have like sandblasted that and painted it. Thanks, man. Side gears. Goodness, it's gorgeous. It's so clean. Okay, and yeah, here we can see we've got an extra shaft to carry the extra spider gears. Somebody out there probably has a really smart way to torque the carrier down to the ring gear. I don't know what that is. So instead, I'm holding it by wedging a bar between a couple of bolts as I go through and torque it, which works until it slips and you whack yourself in the face or hand with the bar. But most importantly, notice I am not wedging it against the bearing surface. Also, just a reminder for mostly myself, it's always a good idea to mark the ones that you have torqued, especially when you're working in a pattern back and forth, to keep track of which ones you have actually finished. Step one is to roughly get things set in place and take most of the backlash out. So tightening down this nut until any movement this way in the pinion shaft is pretty much out. Then getting the side gears tightened down enough that you can at least tell what the position of the ring gear is. In this case, then now you want to tighten down this side to drive the ring gear into the pinion, and the shop manual says to aim for 0 backlash between the two. So hard to do this with one hand. Also, I don't have the this ring gear and the differential carrier completely tight between the two side bearings, so I'm making sure when I check for backlash between these two to keep this ring gear pushed into the side carrier here as much as I can, so I can actually tell whether I have backlash based on the position of this side nut. And that backlash that I'm feeling for is between these two gears. Hopefully you can see and or hear that. So there's quite a bit of backlash there. So I'm going to tighten this down until I've gotten that backlash just taken out. After taking that backlash out, I'm going to mark that position here on the side nut, then back it off a ways to make sure that the O-ring inside is not causing me issues, and then bring it down to I think it's one flat surface here, like one whatever you want to call that, looser than this 0 backlash measurement. So that side completed, and then retighten to a notch loose. We're going to do the same thing here, tighten it all the way down, take all the backlash out, and then mark it. Now with the backlash taken out and marked here, I'm going to back this one off And then we're going to go 2 notches tighter, which is going to preload the bearing. So now I need to measure the turning torque of the pinion. And so somehow I've got to get, you know, my little inch-pounds torque wrench attached to the pinion shaft. So my flawless plan for that is to wrap some tape and maybe some cardboard around this socket until it's much larger and can kind of fit snugly in the pinion shaft enough that it'll turn it. And there we go. Lovely. Sort of kind of fits snugly down in there. Enough that should be able to measure. Okay, now basically we have no preload at all currently. So we're going to measure how much torque that takes to turn. It's almost not measurable. Then we're supposed to add 4 to 6 inch-pounds or 9 to 11 inch-pounds if the bearings are new. I have half new bearings, half old bearings. So, you know, between 6 and 11 inch-pounds we need to add to this. Okay, we pretty much got that torque. I'm not super crazy about how it feels. I've done a bunch of other, you know, differentials and stuff, and I don't know. It seems like it might be a little bit on the tight side to me, and I'm on the bottom range of the adjustment, but we need to check the pattern anyway, so we're going to do a little arts and crafts time. So yeah, painting it onto the pinion gear was kind of a mistake. It worked a lot better to paint it on the ring gear and then look for the pinion gear to actually kind of wipe off the marking compound. So once again, the shop manual has the right idea. Rather than just turning the pinion by hand, I really couldn't see a pattern on the ring gear when doing that. So instead, and I still had the nut in holding the pinion shaft at that point, put a little friction like by holding it with a rag on the pinion and then turn the ring gear with a wrench to get a good amount of force on it. That's enough to help the pattern show up better on the ring gear. And I played with the backlash some to improve it. And we're getting closer backlash-wise, but as you can see, my contact is still pretty high on the ring gear. I think I need to change the shim. So I have salvaged a shim out of some of the old diffs. And I'm gonna take this one out, take it apart, see what I've got in there now, see if I can add a shim to it, and see if it improves the situation. Obviously, the whole thing has to come apart, and then you have to press the bearing off the pinion shaft. So the best part about differentials is not doing them once, it's doing them numerous times until you get the shims right. Yay! Another shout out to the shop manual. They actually show you what sort of pattern you're looking for and also what a bad pattern means and what changes you should make. Hardly the only place you can find this information, but it is pretty handy here. And my reaction is as you would expect.
Yeah, that's one fine looking barbecue pit. Why doesn't mine look like that? Ah!
Okay, several harrowing attempts later. I've reset the backlash a few times, continue to kind of adjust the pattern. The shim that I found in the old diff was about 4 thou thicker than the shim that was in this one. So I think it's helped. You notice it's moved the pattern down on the tooth noticeably. And I think I've got the backlash pretty much dialed, enough to get the pattern like moved to where the most of the contact is happening roughly in the center of the tooth there too. So I might do a little more fiddling just to make sure, sometimes when I'm not super confident, like this is not a really perfect looking pattern. So sometimes it's nice to go too far, especially in a situation like this where it's relatively easy to do so. So go too far, that way you can see, yep, okay, a pattern's getting worse now, and then bring it back. So I'll probably go a little more backspace and then dial it back until I feel like I'm as good as I'm going to get it compromise-wise. Well, 2 steps forward, 1 step back as usual. When removing this bearing to do the shim change, I damaged it with the bearing puller and the press. Just a little bit, as you can see there. Now these bearings aren't super expensive, but also I don't want to wait a week to get replacements. Thankfully, this is the same bearing that is used as the pinion bearing on a Ford 9-inch, which means Speedway Motors has them available in stock at the customer counter. So I was in luck and able to get one locally this morning. And yeah, now I can destroy this completely by pulling it off and slap a new one on there. Then we'll probably end up finding out that there was just enough wear on the old one that now my shim results in a slightly different pattern. But c'est la vie. Okay, yet another new flawless plan. I took the old bearing that was damaged and I hand ground out the inner surface of that so that it just slides on and off of the pinion. Snug fit, but can be done by hand. That way I don't have to keep pressing it on and off, and I can try some different shims. I have a handful left over from another project that I found, and so I want to see if, I just want to make sure that I've got the shim dialed as much as possible to get the pattern as good as I can. So we're going to do the assembly and disassembly a few more times, and while I do that, another little tip on the side nut that holds everything in. I've been lubricating the O-rings so that I don't tear them, but while I'm doing all the test fitting, it's probably smarter to just leave the O-ring out until I'm sure that everything is dialed in. So another little tip there. All right, so after 7 or 8 or 30 attempts, we've now got about the right amount of backlash, measured here on the dial indicator. It's patterning out about as well as it is going to, I believe, after attempting just about every possible combination of shim and backlash adjustment. So I'm just going to get final values dialed in on the side gears and on the back here to make sure you've got the right amount of drag on all the gears. Then we're going to put our little locking tabs in to bolt it all in place and button this thing up. And then, hopefully, we're going to put it back onto the engine. Got my nephew here today, who's been a big help in getting the car moved back here because we had the car out in storage. So we were able to move the dead vehicle home from storage on the trailer, get this wrapped up, and hopefully get the drivetrain back in the car. And we've got our seals installed now, the little retaining ring as well. And so we should have a now freshly rebuilt, new bearings, 4-spider, 355 gear ratio, which I wrote on there so I'd remember in the future. This differential should now be ready to put up with the unbelievably ridiculous nearly 100 wheel horsepower of the Corvair engine. Now you might have noticed the method I used for sliding the transaxle on, a little unconventional. I put the input shaft into the clutch first and then slid the whole transaxle on, mostly because I have muscle here with me today, and so with 2 of us it makes it pretty easy, and I thought that might make it easier rather than having to line up all the splines on the clutch end. And it went on really slick with just one minor problem, and that's that I forgot to put the clutch linkage and the throwout bearing. Yeah, that stuff works a lot better when it's inside the bell housing than when it's outside. So take 2. as soon as I came around to the other side of the car to jack it back up and adjust the clutch, I'm greeted by this lovely lake of gear oil, which is coming from where? Can I have the light, please? Thank you. Not the fill plug. Coming from the side seal. Awesome!
Poor Corvair. So sad.
Poor Corvair, so sad indeed.
Yeah.
Poor Dad. So that must mean the O-ring is leaking.
The boring.
The boring, is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. Pro tip, if you don't want to have to do this twice, maybe actually install the seals in the side axle holders. Yeah, I just put it together without the seals in it. Guess that could be why it's leaking. Ah, the joys of working directly on top of a pile of gear oil soaked kitty litter. Although I will say, at least it's fresh gear oil. No automotive fluid smells worse than used gear oil. And here you have it, folks. That is what a differential side gear thing looks like when there's no seal in it. You know, I've been asked in the past if I actually make these mistakes or if this is like a setup for YouTube. Oh no, no, I can promise you, this is all just really me being this stupid. I'm easily this stupid. No fake drama here, folks. Just genuine stupidity. At least I don't have to tear the differential apart to put the seals in. So, seals go in, stubs go back in, axles go back in, and we'll try this again. So, the driving review is, it works, like against all odds, and it seems to work pretty well. The weather's kind of been garbage, so sorry I won't have any footage for you of it right now. And I haven't had a chance to do like 75 mile an hour highway speeds in it yet. But actually, so far, it feels really good. Quiet, smooth. I think the differential rebuild has been a success. And the 4-Spider kit should be more than enough to put up with the, nearly 100 horsepower that this thing puts out. So overall, happy with the results. Hopefully get some more use out of it this year when the weather improves. Thanks for watching. See you next time.